Okay, so we're continuing the binge watching of the Planet of the Apes series, and we are jumping right into part 2, the sequel, Beneath the Planet of the Apes, remastered in THX. So this particular film came out 2 years after the original. It's got a 100-minute runtime, 1970. And as soon as the wrap of the original film, they saw how successful it was, they immediately started getting together to write part 2. And the studios approached Rod Sterling, but they didn't really like his ideas. And then they hired this guy, Paul Den, and Mort Abrams. Paul Den was like a TV writer, and Ted Post, the guy that directed it, was a new director. They had originally approached the original director, Franklin Schaffner, but he was directing Patton. So then they got this TV guy that was big into television programming to direct the film. And at parts of it felt like 60s and 70s cheesy sci-fi TV. But they were working with the technology they had at the time. This particular movie cost $2.5 million to make and had a box office total of $19 million. Charlton Heston did not want to reprise his role as Taylor, but begrudgingly agreed to do a brief intro and ending conclusion as long as his character was killed off so he wouldn't have to appear in any more movies. And he wanted his salary for being in the film to be donated to charity. So the main character that they replace him with is this James Franciscus. I don't know how to pronounce the last name. It sounds French. They had him play this other astronaut named Brent to kind of be the main title role. And this movie is kind of playing off of fears of World War II and Cold War times of world-ending nuclear war. And there's continuity issues after the fact, because I felt like they made this movie seem like it could have wrapped everything up. And we're going to do a spoiler alert. Basically, the apes are going into the uninhabited area, which was like the fallout zone of past nuclear wars that made the modern version of man kind of dumb and mute. Then they find these subterranean people that had advanced to telepathy and mind control, and they worshipped a giant golden nuclear warhead called the Alpha Omega bomb, and they had a whole cultic religion based around it, and they would wear masks because they were horribly disfigured by radiation. And it just was really bizarre. Kind of a very dark film. It was enjoyable to a degree, but it was just so bizarre, and the whole religious cultic belief just kind of freaked me out. And the movie basically ends where apes are trying to destroy these advanced humans that are subterranean, and then the advanced humans detonate a nuclear bomb, and the movie ends. And then that is why I don't think I'm going to talk about any of the other films, because to me they've gotten progressively worse after this movie, because I felt like this movie was a series ending movie with the way they ended it. And then there's major continuity issues when you get into part 3, because these guys were very primitive. The primate people were very primitive, and then all of a sudden they were able to, in part 3, go from their world is completely obliterated, which it seems like no time between the first movie and the second movie had really passed. And then all of a sudden in part 3, they're able to revitalize the crashed spaceship from the Americans in the first movie, go back through the time continuum or whatever, and then end up in the 1970s planet Earth. These guys escaped the nuclear blast. So, I don't know. There wasn't really a continuity issue from here, because I see what they were doing. They were trying to kind of wrap it up, and then the studio drags it out into all these other movies, and to me, I don't know. It doesn't work for me. But I still consider this, I don't want to say, I guess it's canon, although there was all kinds of fighting and disagreements for the writing, very polarizing reviews, whereas the first movie is considered iconic. This movie had a Rotten Tomatoes score of 37%, although Google users are in the 80s, 80%. IMDb is 6 out of 10. it just felt very cheesy to me, and the whole subterranean plot of people worshiping a nuclear bomb as like an icon on religion, it was just bizarre. But it still captured my viewing, and as I get deeper into the series, I'm on the final one, part 5 of the original ones, and I'm having to turn it off and walk away at some point because of they just keep, like I mentioned, they're just not holding my attention like the first one and the second one did. So I am 3 out of 5 in this movie. It's not terrible enough to be a 2 and below. Like, I don't agree with the 37% rating. It's still interesting. It's just weird. And there was just too many conflicts on how it was going to be written, and they didn't have the original director. And then Charlton Heston didn't really want to have a main role in it, so I felt like it was kind of a fractured movie. They're like, let's just keep the vibes going and play off the first movie and just drag this out to where it's just kind of not great. That's my opinion. It's a one watch for me. Like I mentioned, the first one is archived in the National Archives for movie preservation. They go downhill from there. So I don't even really have that much more to add about it. It's just a one watch movie. A B movie, if you may, not a cult classic. It's okay. The whole conclusion was very dark, and even my kids were like freaked out by it. So that's it. I'm not going to be talking about any more of these other than the fact they were milking it. Kind of like I just finished watching the Scrubs television program. They should have wrapped that show up around season 6 or 7, and they just kept dragging it out. Like the whole phrase with the Happy Days, it jumps the shark at a point. So until next time, folks, we will see you then.